So I've been working in drug policy for the last 10 years or so. My interest really started when I was an undergraduate student at the University of Leicester, because I was studying law at the time, and to me at least, I always thought the law was designed to protect us from harm, to promote our health, to promote our human rights, and to ensure that we're safe. And the more I started looking at drug policy research, drug policy issues in general, I started thinking that actually the law doesn't really work like that. So the way that we've implemented the Misuse of Drugs Act and the Psychoactive Substances Act and this general policy of prohibition that we have in the UK and that we have all across the world, it kind of does the exact opposite of protecting us from harm, ensuring our safety, promoting our human rights. So I became extremely passionate then about wanting to change the law in this area. So I went on to do a master's in applied criminology, looking at these issues. And then I did my PhD at the University of Manchester, looking at how a human rights perspective can change the way that we think about issues of drug control. And I've recently written a book looking at this. So it's called Human Rights and Drug Control, A New Perspective. It was published last year. And I've also written a couple of publications on cannabis social clubs as well. So looking at other ways that we can regulate cannabis and whether cannabis social clubs could provide a safer, more feasible alternative to prohibition. And I'm working at the moment with colleagues at institutions in Europe and in Latin America, looking at how cannabis social clubs do operate in Europe and in Latin American countries. I'm also the co-investigator for the Drug Policy Voices project, which has been generously funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. The project is led by Dr. Rebecca Askew. And if you'd like to know more about the project, you can go on our website, drugpolicyvoices.co.uk. And the aims of this project are really to include the voices and the values of a variety of people with experience of using substances into debates about drug policy reform. And that's because very often the voices of people who use drugs are left out of drug policy debates. And I think it's really important to include these voices because the experiences of people who use substances, that's also evidence. And we talk a lot about how drug policy should be evidence-based and should be led by evidence. And while I completely believe that, and I do think the experiential knowledge of people who use substances is extremely important, it's also important to acknowledge the fact that drug policy is political. So very often our drug policies are shaped by our morality, it's shaped by our values, it's not just shaped by the evidence itself. So it's even more important than I think to include the voices and the values of people who use substances into these debates, because then we can start addressing the bigger questions, such as what should the goals of drug policy should be. So as well as focusing on that project, I'm also a member of the Policy Advisory Council for the Conservative Group for Drug Policy Reform. And as part of that work, I'm looking at the medical cannabis landscape in the UK and how we can regulate medical cannabis in the UK. And I'm also looking at the health rights of patients who are using cannabis as a medicine.